Tonight, the bombshell verdict in the Bruce Lehrmann defamation case.
By conclusion on rape, Mr Lehrmann raped Miss Higgins.
Justice Michael Lee today upholding 10 and Lisa Wilkinson's truth defence over a 2021 project interview with Brittany Higgins detailing her sexual assault in Parliament House in early 2019.
Today, the federal court has found that I published a true story about a rape in a federal minister's office.
This is a resounding win for Channel 10, and it is a dismal failure by Bruce Lehrmann.
Justice Lee scathing of Bruce Lehrmann's credibility while also calling Brittany Higgins an unreliable historian.
I am satisfied that in important respects she told deliberate lies. Having escaped the lion's den, Mr Lehrmann made the mistake of coming back for his hat.
After the criminal case against Lehrmann collapsed due to juror misconduct, this defamation case has effectively been a de facto rape trial. Justice Lee today finding on the balance of probabilities, Bruce Lehrmann is a rapist.
The judge has called you a rapist today, Mr Lehrmann. What do you have to say to that?
Was it a serious mistake to take the action?
The judge has said you escaped the lion's den, but you went back to get your cut. Would you agree with that?
We are coming to you live tonight from the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation. First, to 10 reporter Alice Hogg, who's been following this case for a long time, and she joins us now. Alice, it's been quite the journey to get to this point. When Justice Lee finally said the words, Mr Lehrmann raped Ms Higgins, what was the reaction in the courtroom?
Yeah, journey is a really good way to describe it. It did actually remain very quiet in the courtroom. It was a packed room filled with members of the public, journalists, and of course those closely involved in the case, Bruce Lehrmann himself and Lisa Wilkinson. Everyone was really listening just so intently to every word that Justice Lee had to say. And we had been listening to him for a couple of hours before we reached that point, hearing him say those words that Mr Lehrmann raped Ms Higgins on that night at Parliament House in Canberra in 2019. He says that he's reached that finding on the balance of probabilities, this of course being a case that's played out in a civil court, and he said that he accepts that Ms Higgins was not aware of her surroundings when sexual intercourse took place or began, and that he has found that she did not consent to having sex with Bruce Lehrmann that night.
Alice, any way of seeing the reaction from Bruce Lehrmann himself in court?
He didn't really appear to show much of a reaction or give too much away, to be honest. He was sitting towards the front of the courtroom listening to these proceedings. He did also leave the court pretty quickly once it had all wrapped up. He walked out alone and was very quickly surrounded by news cameras and journalists, of course, fielding questions to him. He did not say anything, though. We did, not too long after that, hear from Network 10 and Lisa Wilkinson, of course, though, offering their own statements. Network 10 has, in a statement, described this judgment as a triumph for truth, while Ms Wilkinson offered a brief statement on the steps of the courthouse defending her reporting and saying that the federal court has found that this was a story of truth and that she is hopeful that this judgment gives strength to women around the country.
Alice, we've seen so many twists and turns in this, so I guess we've got the question of costs to come. Is that it then, finally, all over?
I mean, I guess we can safely say that's it for today. We do have that issue of cost still to come, and the parties have until next week to make their submissions over that argument. As for Lehrmann himself, of course, he had been seeking damages in this case if he had been successful. Justice Lee concluded today that he is not entitled to vindication to his reputation, and he even said that having escaped the lion's den, Mr Lehrmann made the mistake in coming back for his hat.
All right, Alice, thank you very much for speaking to us. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Federal court judge has found Bruce Lehrmann did rape Brittany Higgins, ending a multi-million-dollar courtroom battle that has captivated the country.
By conclusion on rape, Mr Lehrmann raped Miss Higgins.
A bombshell finding.
Mr Lehrmann was hell-bent on his pursuit of gratification. He was so intent upon gratification to be indifferent to Miss Higgins' consent.
Vindication for a victim who's been through hell.
Her evidence that she was not fully aware of her surroundings, but then suddenly became aware of Mr Lehrmann on top of her, at which time he was performing the sexual act, struck me forcefully as being credible and having the ring of truth.
Can you tell us the truth?
The federal judge today finding on the balance of probabilities that Bruce Lehrmann raped Brittany Higgins, who was too drunk to consent.
Although I'm not satisfied there was a clear verbal protest, I'm comfortably satisfied he was aware of her condition.
Delivering his decision, the judge found inconsistencies on both sides, that Lehrmann told deliberate lies,
His attachment to the truth was a tenuous one.
and that Higgins was a complex and unsatisfactory witness.
Ms Higgins crafted a narrative accusing others of putting up roadblocks.
Justice Lee also critical of the project for failing to investigate certain inconsistencies in Higgins' story, failing to question the motivation of her boyfriend David Shiraz, and for not doing more to reach Lehrmann before the story aired.
He was not living the life of a hermit. He was working for a public relations company in Sydney.
And while the judge accepted she was let down by Ten's legal advice, Lisa Wilkinson was also criticised over that Logie speech.
If she had thought matters through as an experienced journalist, she ought to have known the speech was fraught with danger.
But after more than 2 hours in an extraordinary judgment, the judge rejected Lehrmann's defamation case against Ten and Wilkinson.
Today, the federal court has found that I published a true story about a rape in a federal minister's office. I sincerely hope that this judgment gives strength to women around the country.
After surviving a criminal trial with no conviction,
Do you regret bringing this case?
based on the civil standard of proof, Lehrmann found to be a rapist.
The judge has called you a rapist today, Mr. Lehrmann. Is that the biggest own goal in history?
Having escaped the lion's den, Mr Lehrmann made the mistake of coming back for his hat.
Do you regret doing this, Mr. Lehrmann?
Well, Justin Quill is an expert defamation lawyer whose firm represented Network 10 in this case. Justin, just how significant was this decision?
It's particularly significant. I mean, it's very, very difficult for media defendants to come to court and prove the truth of allegations like this. Bruce Lehrmann didn't have to prove that a rape didn't happen. Channel 10 had to prove that it did happen. So it's very significant from that perspective. It's significant, I think, for rape victims. And ultimately, you've got to think about the central allegation here. A woman was raped, not just in our Parliament House, but in a minister's office. It's quite extraordinary. So, yes, on any view, it's a significant case.
The judge did find that both Lehrmann and Higgins were unreliable witnesses. Why did Justice Lee ultimately end up believing Miss Higgins?
He's on a forensically examined, deconstructed and pulled apart Lehrmann's version of events and laid bare the implausibility of that version of events. In contrast, his Honour said that he was forcefully struck by Brittany Higgins' evidence on the central point. So ultimately, His Honour found that she may have been unreliable on matters in the periphery, but on the central point, His Honour found that she was a believable witness. And I think the contrast between those two things went a long way towards the finding that Bruce Lehrmann raped Brittany Higgins.
The civil court has found that Bruce Lehrmann is a rapist. Do you think we'll see the criminal case reopened? Will Brittany Higgins be back before the court in a criminal trial?
Look, in theory, it's possible. Bruce Lehrmann's case was withdrawn. It's not the case that he was found not guilty by a jury, so therefore the double jeopardy rules don't apply. So he could be brought back before the courts for a criminal case. And it may be that this decision buoys Brittany Higgins and she's happy to come back again and give evidence again. But His Honour was at pains to point out the difference between the criminal standard and the civil standard, and the fact that His Honour today found that Bruce Lehrmann is a rapist doesn't mean that on a criminal standard a jury would find the same. They may not. So as to what the new DPP in the Australian Capital Territory may or may not do, who knows?
Justin, it was quite extraordinary that Justice Lee opened up his court and showed the proceedings on YouTube. If you had to go to one quote from him today, it's when he said Bruce Lehrmann escaped the lion's den only to go back in for his hat. Was it clear from the outset how risky this was always going to be for Lehrmann?
Yes, I think it was absolutely clear from the outset that this was pure lunacy by Bruce Lehrmann to bring this case. I think he did, not just because he wanted to make money out of it and reinvent history, but because he thought Brittany Higgins wouldn't turn up to give evidence. And had she not turned up to give evidence, I don't imagine that Channel 10 could have possibly won the case. So, yeah, it was crazy stuff from him to bring this case.
Do you anticipate that Lehrmann will appeal?
I would have thought it would be a bad decision for him to appeal. I'd be confident that we would hang on to the judgment. So I'd be surprised if he appealed, but I'm not going to guess what Bruce Lehrmann would do. His judgment hasn't been the best or the most rational so far.
Can I ask you just to, I don't know, think more philosophically about this for a second? So it's really clear that Bruce Lehrmann is the big loser out of today's judgment, but it's also clear that no one else emerged unscathed. Brittany Higgins didn't. We mentioned the unreliable witness on certain aspects finding before. Channel 10 didn't. The project didn't. Everyone involved has lost something as a result of this. What do you think we should take from this whole experience?
Well, you know, I hate to say it, but it is often true that the only winners when anyone goes to court are the lawyers, and that is often the case. Look, ultimately, though, I just don't think it's right to say that 10 isn't and the project isn't a big win. I know I'm appearing on the project, so it seems like I'm just saying it for this reason, but I'm not. 10 had a big win today. It is really, really difficult to prove the truth of these sort of allegations, and it is a significant win to have done so, and hopefully it's a warning to other plaintiffs who want to come to court and con the court. So yeah, look, there are rarely complete winners in legal cases, but 10's as big a winner tonight as you could hope for.
Justin, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Well, after 5 years, 2 court cases and plenty of twists and turns, the young woman at the centre of this story, Brittany Higgins, has been vindicated. Saxon Mullins is a rape survivor and victims advocate. She spoke alongside Brittany at the Women's March outside Parliament in 2021. Saxon, how do you think other survivors would be feeling about how all of this has played out?
I think everyone's feeling very complicated today. You know, out of the outcomes that could have happened, this is the best one, but the journey that it took to get here was horrible. It was horrible for Brittany. It was horrible for survivors to watch. And it really just shone a light on how brutal our justice system is. And I think a lot of survivors are feeling really raw after today.
It must have been particularly triggering for you. You had to go through that justice system after an assault. What was that like?
It was really difficult. You know, I understand the need to balance the evidence that the judge has, but hearing him call Brittany Higgins an unreliable witness really struck a chord with me. That's the exact same way that I was described by the judge in my second trial. And this idea that trauma makes you unreliable is really difficult. But at the same time, I thought the judge was really, really considered in his decision. And something that was really important was he spoke about rape myths, which I haven't really seen a lot of justices do. And people inside the judicial system really are the ones who need to be talking about rape myths and what they look like and how they find their way into our daily lives and into our justice system. So that was really heartening.
Can you give us a couple examples of that?
When he spoke about the behaviour that a survivor might exhibit after a sexual assault and how that doesn't necessarily mean that they are lying just because they don't act in the way that you think you would act or you think someone should act, which is something that a lot of people believe. They really take stock in what someone does or says right after an assault to mean, oh, well, that couldn't possibly have happened. So to speak directly to something like that is really, really important.
We also saw him embark upon a really lengthy discussion of rape, but also of consent. What were your impressions of that?
It was really well researched, it was really considered, and it was really important. You know, I think at the height of it, there was 45,000 people watching that, and hearing someone, especially an older person who is in the justice system, which has historically not taken this stuff as seriously as it needs to, hearing him describe what consent looks like in the modern era, what sexual assault used to mean, what it means now, rape myths, all of that, I think is so important for people to be watching, and especially people who are involved in our justice system to be really understanding that. And from someone as important and influential as this judge, I think it was so, so important.
Saxon, we can appreciate it's been a really hard day for a lot of people. Thanks for chatting to us.